Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third webinar for OpenAir's Carbon Removal Challenge. My name is Duncan McDowell, Media Director for OpenAir's Carbon Removal Challenge. Today, we're in discussion with Peter Reinhardt, CEO and co-founder of Charm Industrial. This year's Carbon Removal Challenge is presented by Peter and his life partner, Erica, which is our way of stating that Peter and Erica's very generous sponsorship has helped make this year's challenge become a reality. We'll be in conversation with Peter for 30 minutes, and we'll try to make time for some Q&As after the chat. So if you have questions, pop them in the Q&A, and we'll try to make time for that. So first of all, thank you, Peter and Erica. And Peter, welcome to this third webinar.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here, and thanks for making it all happen.
Fantastic. So I just want to jump, given that we only have 30 minutes, I'll skip the extended introduction of what the removal challenge is, and we'll just jump right into Charm Industrial and Peter Reinhardt, if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
So just to start off with, can you just give us a very brief description on what Charm Industrial's core product and service is?
Yeah, so at Charm, we do carbon removal. Our mission is to return the atmosphere to 280 parts per million CO2. And the way we do it is a little weird. We have a pretty unique process for carbon removal. And so part of the goal in sponsoring this is to like encourage other weird ideas for people to try out in terms of carbon removal. But the way we do it is we take agricultural residue and forest fire prevention residue. So think like corn straw. It's like all the leaves and stalks that are left at the end of the year on the cornfield and just rot. All that CO2 returns to the atmosphere. Instead, we can take that and cook it into a liquid called bio-oil and then inject that into old oil and gas reservoirs. It's been going reasonably well. We've delivered about 7,000 tons of removal so far, which I think is something like 60 to 80% of global permanent carbon removal deliveries. And growing as fast as we can. A lot of attention on measurement reporting and verification as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we'll get into the weeds of Charm Industrial a bit later on, but I want to sort of ask you a few questions that I'm hoping are going to be pertinent to the emerging generation of carbon managers. And for that, I want to get a little bit into Peter's backstory, but also Charm's backstory. Can we differentiate between ideas, motivation, and action? So where did your motivation for carbon removal solutions come from? How did that trickle into the idea for Charm Industrial? And then what was precisely the catalytic moment your company, Charm Industrial, became a reality? So idea, motivation first, idea second, and then moment, it all started to crystallize.
Sure. So as a brief background, I studied aerospace engineering at MIT and dropped out with my roommates, started a software company called Segment, very kind of cliche Silicon Valley story. And the company failed really hard for like a year and a half, and then things kind of turned around and we started doing pretty well in by 2014, 2015. And so recruiting became our biggest challenge. And both between sort of motivation around recruiting and sort of helping people understand that we were going to be contributing to something bigger and more important in the world, I started looking at buying offsets so that as a company, we would be net zero, or I guess not net zero, we'd be carbon neutral, and started looking around and like everything was really uncompelling, but I bought some nature-based offsets thinking that it was a good idea. It would protect the rainforest in the Amazon and protect the rainforest in Indonesia. So we're excited about it. We like blogged about it. And we were happy that we were like carbon neutral almost from day one in the company. We're going to scale with that. And then a year later, I went back and I looked at it and I was like, wait a second, like what happened here? Like I wanted to be intellectually honest about like what really happened with that money that we bought. Was it really carbon neutral? Like we're about to do it again for the second year. Like what happened? And as I dug into it, I was like, oh shit, like I have no idea. I have no idea for the carbon that we removed. Like there's no real verification of it. Like most of the money went to marketing dollars. You could see because it was nonprofits, you could go in and look at their statements. And so my motivation was like realizing that this was a product that I personally wanted in leading Segment. and it really wasn't available. Like you couldn't buy. There was no supply of like high quality carbon removal, and so I was pissed off that there was like no good product on the market. Um, and spent a couple years kind of circling, trying to figure out what could be done there, and eventually decided, screw it. Like in addition to the day job of running Segment, I'm going to start another company in February 2018 and try to figure out how to make a better product here. Now, since then, a bunch of interesting and cool companies have entered the space. Many of them are friends at Heirloom and Climeworks and Ion and so on. But I think we still need like more interesting, weird ideas for how to remove carbon. Um, so yeah, that's the original motivation.
Sorry, rookie mistake. I just realized that I was on mute. I was saying that's awesome. Thank you very much. In my research, I came to understand that Charm was born from a pivot. You started aiming to solve for green hydrogen, but discovered carbon removal along the way. Can you speak to the value of serendipity and remaining flexible in R&D? To what extent do carbon removers have to doggedly pursue their blueprint, or is it more of a loose phenomenon?
Yeah, I think one of the most destructive stories in Silicon Valley or in the startup world, maybe I should say, is the Airbnb story. Because the Airbnb story is one where they just kept hanging on for long enough with the same original idea, and then eventually it started working. I think it's a super destructive story, actually, because that is not the way that it works at most companies. Like Slack, Dropbox, you look at like any of these stories, they're all like serendipitous discoveries. Same was true for Segment. Same was definitely true for Charm. Um, we started with the idea that we would look for try to take an industrial process that could be made carbon negative instead of carbon positive. So the original idea was, say, like iron making. Iron making emits a lot of CO2 today because it uses coal. Is there a way that that could be run on some other thing? Our vision now is on bio oil, where it would actually somehow leave behind carbon removal from running that same industrial process. So you could try to find an idea where you could flip an industrial process from a net emitter to a net remover. And I looked at a bunch of industrial processes, methanol, plastics, cement, etc. The one that it seemed to kind of work for was around iron making, where we would leave char behind on the field in the production of biooil and so on. So that was kind of the original vision, was take an industrial process, specifically using fossil fuels, and flip it to negative. That still is the eventual vision, but we ended up discovering along the way that pumping the bio oil underground for carbon removal was like a way higher price point per ton of bio oil produced and would be the enabling thing to get us to scale. So the serendipity part of it was discovering that the roadster market, the Tesla roadster market, if you will, for bio oil was actually carbon removal, even if the eventual Model 3 or mass market car equivalent is still more akin to the original vision. So I do think taking advantage of that serendipity is really important. I think there are some other cool companies, by the way, that have taken on this thesis of like flipping an industrial process to be carbon negative. I see Paul from Pebble. I don't know what their cement substitute product, exactly how that works, but some of these cement processes now are carbon negative, or have the potential to be in how they sort of interact with CO2 in the curing process, which is really exciting.
Okay, that is very exciting. So moving on to getting going and how someone were to begin to start to attempt to get some traction in the carbon management space. In your experience, what's the very best way of getting going in carbon removals? Should the upcoming generation um, really focus on perfecting their intellectual property until they can go to market with engineered perfection? Or should they jump into sales with a prototype? Should they go for VC backing? So basically, where should the R&D lab work end and the business end of things start?
There's obviously a balance here.
Mhm.
uh, uh, I would say that the most common failure by far is to go in the direction of working in a hole on the perfect technology, and then it never sees the light of day and it never really gets funding, and it kind of just shrivels and dies and no one is really even aware of it. That's by far the most common failure mode for startups. At the extreme other end, right, you have the Theranoses of the world who have nothing except like razzle dazzle and like it's fraud. So obviously the truth lies somewhere in between, or the best path lies somewhere in between. But I do think that for the vast majority of people, they tend to index way too heavily on the technology and the technology development, and not nearly enough on sales. Um, uh, and I don't think that I really. It's not just about selling so that you can raise the money to go do the thing. Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but that very easily gets out of control. It's actually that you'll just build the wrong thing. If you can't sell it, you're just going to build the wrong thing. That's actually the most important signal. And you can waste, like I wasted years at the beginning of Segment and probably years at the beginning of Charm. Like we were just building the wrong thing because we hadn't found what customers were actually willing and excited to buy. And so I think the most important part of sales is it's actually really the test of product market fit. The test of product market fit is like, will someone actually put down dollars to buy it? Um, and yeah, that's really important. I don't know how to I don't know how to describe it. So I think the vast majority, like 99% of founders would probably first time founders would probably do better to focus more on go to market and more on sales as a test of whether other people actually care about their idea. Um, there's a
Awesome.
there's kind of a saying, I think, that first time founders focus on product and second time founders focus on distribution. That's definitely the case. Like the first time I started a company with Segment, I was definitely focused on product, and it was very painful transition after 10 million in revenue, where I like went got pushed by the business more and more into learning sales and understanding the importance of sales. Again, not just for revenue generation, but for actually understanding whether people really truly got value out of it. Um, and as a second time founder now, it's definitely true. Like I definitely have put more emphasis from the beginning on distribution, and uh, it's very clarifying as to like what the product actually needs to be, right? Like as an example, you might think like, oh, having the best technology for carbon removal is going to win. Well, actually, what the customer cares about today, I will tell you, is measurement, reporting, and verification. It's really truly what the customer cares about. You can see it in the like garbage offset part of the market. Like something like 50% of that market demand evaporated year over year. Like 2023 was massively down from an offset purchasing perspective because people don't trust it anymore. And
Mhm.
like that's the differentiation of carbon removal is trusting it. What they're buying is the MRV. Like carbon removal isn't delivered off the back end of a truck at a loading dock. It's like removed somewhere in the atmosphere, and then uh, how do you measure, report, and verify that? That's hard, and that's actually what people are buying.
I
Uh,
love that saying. I love that the idea that carbon removal is not delivered off the back end of the truck, and that's so very true. That trust is something that's so crucial that needs to be built up in this market. I had a different question about Charm's core service, but I think that we should skip on to MRV because I agree that that is crucial. So, talking about the importance of monitoring, reporting, and verification, how, so more precisely, how and where is yours? Is it from the biomass decomposition avoidance? Is it avoided methane leaks? Is it regenerative agricultural practice encouragement? Is it finding out how to make steel from bio oil? Where are the measurements in Charm's process taking place?
most of the measurements happen in the verification of farming practices upstream because you include the farm in the boundary condition, right? So you have CO2 coming out of the atmosphere into the plants. It matters how those plants were grown and what the farming practice was before you showed up. Was it burned? Did it rot? How much of it rotted? How much of it stayed in the soil carbon? So some of the measurement involves that understanding of the crop, but then most of the measurement, reporting, and verification involves all the legs of transport of the biomass or the bio oil, all the electricity consumption by the pyrolysis or the injection, what the flue stack emissions were, which if it's just CO2, that's fine. But if it's carbon monoxide or methane or NOx or other things that are uh, stronger greenhouse gases, that matters in the accounting, et cetera. So if people are interested in this, Isometric just published a bio oil sequestration protocol that is quite in depth. I have read it several times over, as you can imagine, since we're working towards working with them as a verifier. Um, it is fairly heavy bedtime reading, but uh, anyways, you can go read it if you want to see all the equations. But like it's primarily most of the measurements are focused in and around our actual operation with the biomass and how we move it and what the emissions from power and fuel and so are along the movement and change from biomass to bio oil through that whole pipeline.
Okay, that's a good. We'll try to put a link to that report from Isometric in the chat, and that would indeed be good reading. I read that Charm Industrial publishes the results of its removals. In doing that, what example are you setting to the wider industry, and what do you hope to incentivize, and what is this initiative about? What do you hope to encourage?
Yeah, and I'll just send a link to this as well. So they've got the isometric link and then the link to the ledger here as well. I think the ledger, like again, if trust really matters, we should be super transparent about like what it is that we're doing and how it's measured. So the idea behind the ledger was to like take that to a pretty far extreme. So you can not only see how many tons we've removed, but if you scroll down, you can see these individual orders. And if you click an individual order, I'll link to a random one here just to make sure people can see it. You can actually see like the full life cycle of how much was removed on a net basis, how much was stored on a total basis, and what the losses were along the way. And so it's like super detailed and super granular. Uh, but honestly, this is like a V0. Like I don't, this is like kind of lame, I think, as compared to what it should be. And so I would love to get to the point where you can see images of operators and videos of operators and like much more detail. Like FedEx, like even FedEx now has like a photo of the package on your doorstep. Like we should get to that level of like you can see that it actually really physically happened. There's no question that it physically happened, and you can believe that it was actually well accounted for based on like all the documentation that's like effectively in a public setting. And people have tried to put this on the blockchains and stuff like that. I don't know that that's really necessary. I don't know what part of the problem that really solves, but certainly like public chain of evidence that's auditable to some degree, I think is very important. And we're trying to set a high bar there.
That is that's a huge initiative, and I think that that's great. I totally encourage that. Skipping ahead to the future in your perspective, what is your crystal ball regarding carbon removals versus emissions reduction versus adaptation to climate change? Where do you see carbon removal going in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Obviously, we know where you hope it's going to go, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously we should be prioritizing reductions right now. Like, in as much as people can push on reductions, they should be doing it. That's what we did when I was running a software company as well. We reduced emissions by buying clean power. We reduced emissions by buying food that had less beef in it, as much as we could, all of those things, encouraging people to take public transport, you name it. But we're still left with some residual emissions and historical emissions that are already a cat out of the bag, right? So for those things, I think carbon removal can help play a part. I think the unfortunate reality is like, on the one hand, we've made a lot of progress actually on reducing emissions intensity. So like if you look at emissions per person in the United States, it peaked like 2 decades ago. And it's actually down quite a bit. Like we're back to like 1911 levels or something like that. Like we're actually doing a pretty dang good job on a per capita basis. There's a lot more people. But it peaks first on per capita and then it declines eventually, like you flip on the overall number. So I think that I think there's a pretty good chance that we're going to make a lot of good progress on the emissions reduction side, especially now that we're seeing economic kind of tipping points on solar and batteries and stuff like that, and like a resurgence in interest in nuclear, thank God. So I'm like hesitantly optimistic that we'll hit some of the reductions goals. But like even if we hit the reduction goals, we're still going to need a lot of carbon removal because we so overfilled the bathtub at this point. And we probably should be researching a lot of adaptation things too. So I don't know. It's like all of the above approach. Even within carbon removal, I think it's all of the above. Like that's why I'm sponsoring this because I like renewable power today is like it's not like it's just solar. It's solar, it's wind, it's geothermal, it's nuclear, it's hydro. We need it all. The same is going to be true in carbon removal. We're going to need bio-oil sequestration. We're going to need direct air capture. We're going to need ocean alkalinity enhancement. We're going to need biomass burial. We're going to need enhanced rock weathering, and we're going to need like 20 other creative technologies too.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So In the interest of speaking directly to the emerging generation, once again, of carbon managers, what are, in your estimation, how can they prepare for a career in carbon management? What pitfalls should they work on avoiding? What is the one important thing that the emerging generation of removers should know? If there is, I know that there's many important things, but if there is one thing that really stands out.
I think there's an unfortunate amount of like hand wringing that happens in the climate space, uh, of like talking about the thing or worrying about the thing or appealing to government to do more about the thing, which like have their place. But ultimately what matters is like doing the thing, right? Like if we're going to talk about carbon removal, like doing carbon removal, like being out in the field, trying to run the machine. And I I think we have gotten to a place culturally where we just don't quite take that agency. Uh, like for all the good that Greta Thunberg has done in the world, and at the time that she did this protest, she was a child, so like give her a little bit of a pass on it. But I think it's like representative of like an endemic kind of mentality about it. She was asked like, "Well, why are you protesting this?" She's like, "Well, it's not my job to come up with a solution. I'm just protesting for a solution." Like, okay, but like ultimately we need people who are taking action and like actually trying to build something. We need engineers, people doing construction. We need the people in the Midwest who like work in or wherever work in factories and like operate oil fields and like do all these things. We need like the actual real thing to happen in the world. And I don't know that we have enough uh push on that. Sure, activist versus entrepreneur, or just like not even the entrepreneur side, like um some of the people that I enjoy, like the thing that I enjoy the most at Charm is when I get to go out in the field and I see like the person who came from oil field services, who's like, I most recent trip to Kansas, I happened to be able to go to like our site in the middle of the night. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. We're running some equipment there, and like the whole team is like there pushing hard on like figuring out how to make it all work. And like those are that like mad respect, like they're out in the field literally in the winter in the cold, like making it happen. And like that's what we need a lot more of.
I agree. Going the distance and truly showing that dedication and walking the talk. So, Peter, we have two questions, and I want to get to those to give you enough time, and also want to be respectful of everyone's time limit and try to wrap this up at the 30-minute mark. So, the first question is from John Hoffmeyer. He asks to please expand on your comment, leave the char in the field as part of your model that seems predominantly liquefaction to maximize liquid production, in parentheses, for sequestration in exhausted oil wells.
Yeah, even with our fast pyrolysis process today, we get out maybe 20-25% of the biomass as char, and about 50% that might be optimizable to 65% in the long run as bio oil, and the remainder is syngas, which can be used as a energy source to power the system. Um, you can't get rid of the char. You just like you get some char and ash mixed together, and the options are either like package it up and ship it to a field where it's more value for a cash crop, leave it on the field, or blend it into the biooil. And uh, eventually, I think leaving it on the field is going to be the best option.
Okay. And that is okay. That's something that Charm Industrial is working at. It's headed in that direction, the leave it on the field route.
Yeah.
Um, Parth is asking what Charm's cost per ton is.
Yeah, it's publicly listed on the website. We sell at $600 per ton today. We have some pathways that are right around that, and we have other more like R&D pathways that are like excruciatingly high above that. And so it depends on exactly what you're talking about, but $600 a ton is probably the number that you're looking for. And it's the same price whether you're buying a massive contract from us or whether you show up with your credit card on the website. And we will
Okay,
drive that down as fast as we can over time.
$600 per ton. You heard it here. Okay, so that's it for questions. There's no more questions. Oh wait, there's actually one that just popped right in. Ryan P. Echo from Tech Carbon says, no cost of production, I'm sure he means. Um, anyways,
Yeah, yeah. Probably not going to just get into our exact cost of production here in terms of the breakdown, but uh, uh, the cost per charm produced bio oil going into sequestration is well north of $600 a ton, but we also know exactly what the levers are that will bring it down. We also sequester with third-party bio oil, which like we buy waste bio oil from other producers. That is like right in the neighborhood of $600 a ton and depends on the exact transport configuration and so on used. So yeah, I
Okay.
still think $600 per ton is the best guidance here.
Okay, there's just one, John Hoffmeyer just followed up asking what the costs, what's the CO2 equivalent per ton of bio oil?
Oh, it is well, yeah. It's not that different than biomass. Uh, so let's see, bio oil can range from like 25 to 45% carbon content by mass, which is pretty similar, maybe a little lower than biomass itself. Um, so let's see, at 50/50, I think it's about 1.65 tons of CO2e. So call it like 1.1 to 1.3 tons CO2e per ton of bio oil, something like that.
Okay. Okay, good. All right, Peter, we're closing in on the hour here, so I just want to thank everyone for joining us. Remember to sign up for this year's challenge for a chance to be chosen as a finalist and flown to New York City to present your ideas at Carbon Unbound USA. That's taking place on May 22nd and 23rd of this year.
Also, I think we can, sorry to put in Duncan, but I think we can officially announce that there will be a prize for a cash prize. Now, in addition to that, we just finalized this, right? I can say this? Yeah, I think I can say
Yeah,
this.
we can go public with that.
X Prize is sponsoring $1,000 per finalist team for the teams that are chosen as finalists. So if you're watching this and you were on the fence, you're like, if only there was $1,000 more incentive to participate in the carbon removal challenge. Now you have that incentive, thanks to our sponsors at X Prize.
Yeah, thank you, X Prize, for that. And I just want to remind everyone also that the deadline is coming up this January 15th. We're still accepting submissions for another week. So get those submissions in. Go to openaircollective.cc/CRC. And I think the link is probably in the chat there somewhere, but it's openaircollective.cc/CRC and get your submissions in. It's the future is now. Peter Reinhardt, thank you so much for your generous sponsorship of this challenge, and we truly appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom for the larger carbon removal community. And we look forward to seeing you in New York.
Yeah, my pleasure. And Godspeed, everybody.